This group's too smart to be enlightened, Dave. I would say I'm excited, but I think every college coach in the country says that. So we're just ready to go. We had our meetings yesterday, took care of all things administratively. We have actually 104 players here right now. Colt Liero, who had a great summer for us, got a couple of things he's got to take care of and should be at practice shortly, but he's not here today. But besides that, everybody's ready to go. We had a walkthrough this morning per NCAA rules without a ball. Kids were attentive. Just got out of a special teams meeting, and really now it's just a time of, as a coaching staff, have not seen these kids since basically April 28th, and now it's just a kind of a continuation. Thought we had laid a good foundation and a good base for us when we went through spring football. It's up to them to take this through the summer. I actually like that version of it. I think it's they need a break. They shouldn't be with us all the time, and I think you'll find out where your true leaders are because they get a chance to emerge because there's no one around. And we'll see what those guys did, and we'll get our first opportunity to get a look at these guys this afternoon when we hit the field at 1:15. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Yes, could you clarify Colt's status? So that's an academic issue with him?
I didn't say that. I just said he's excused and he should be here shortly.
Okay. By tomorrow?
Shortly.
Okay.
Coach, you know, some positions, well, all positions, I guess, aren't really decided on the depth chart yet. At what point do you want to decide and kind of settle in on those in terms of before the first game?
We'll have 22 practices before we determine that, AJ, and then that'll give us roughly about 8 days before our opening game against Arkansas State. But we've everything's open. You know, we had 15 practices in the spring. For us, it's just really a rotation of who's in, who's out, so that we know what's in there. But in almost every position of our team, you know, what our kids are striving for, you know, if you're a defensive lineman, are you in the top 8 or 9? Because that's what's going to play. We're going to play 6 linebackers, going to play 10 DBs. We're going to play 6 or 7 wideouts. Same thing at tight end, 3 or 4 running backs. So everybody's just trying to see where they fit in terms of a rotation. I think we've really developed depth over the last couple of years here, and everybody understands that. You know, it's not about being the #1 guy. You know, it's about being in the rotation because we believe if you're in the rotation, you're going to play, and that's how we handle it. So for right now, it's just how many reps can we get. I think the unique thing is how we practice. We get so many reps, so it's not like someone's getting shortchanged and we don't have an opportunity to really fully evaluate them. And we really feel we do, but we also feel to figure out exactly who's going to be in the rotation, we should take 22 practices to go through that. It doesn't really benefit us to anoint somebody today because, you know, we need to really get them to understand that there's competition and that, you know, we believe that will bring the best out of you. So we got 22 practice opportunities before we get into real game plan, game week for Arkansas State, and we'll use all 22 of those to make our final determination at any position.
Coach, with 4 new coaches in the league, Mike Leach in particular and Rich Rodriguez down in Arizona, how much have you studied them before they came to their current locations? And had you visited with any of them prior to their coming to the Pac-12? And how much will that change the way you look at the Pac-12 as you go through the season?
It really doesn't because we don't play them till late. We don't play any of those guys until later. We actually don't play UCLA, but we don't play Washington State, I think, till Game 5. Or we play Arizona Game 4, and you know. So it's just like facing any other opponent that we would have in the 4th week. I visited Rich when he was an offensive coordinator at Clemson. That was over 10, 11 years ago. So I'm sure he's changed since then. So it'll be just like our normal approach when we're facing, you know, an opponent and breaking them down. But we haven't done anything special for those 4 guys that have come into the league.
Coach, be it Mariota or Bennett, you see much benefit of them not having to leave the state the first 4 games and kind of getting their Division I leadership feet wet here at Autzen those first 4 weeks?
Yes and no. You know, I would always say sometimes it's good to be at home, but I still remember a vivid conversation I had with Will Takwafu. We opened up when Will's first time when he had an opportunity to play here, and he told me he spent the entire first half looking at the crowd. So, you know, you sometimes think it's a home field advantage, but I think this venue is so overwhelming for sometimes it takes guys, you know, a hard time. LaMichael told me the same thing. You know, LaMichael played up at Boise State, but then really his debut was down here in our opening game here against Purdue, and it took him a while. And he said, Coach, you know, when you're not playing, you kind of understand it, but when you're actually out there playing and that feeling's kind of, you know, it's kind of overwhelming. I would think, you know, basic rule of thumb is better open up at home, but I've had some guys tell me elsewhere, so, we'll see. But for whoever it ends up being, it's going to be their first start, and we're going to be at home, so we'll see how that works out.
Chip, I know this doesn't affect this season, but just wondered if you had some thoughts with what happened this summer as far as the playoff upcoming here in a couple of years, if you could speak to that a little bit.
The expansion?
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand what you got. In 2 years from now, instead of 2 teams qualifying like has happened in the last, then 4 teams are going to qualify. And so it's basically a +1, I guess, is the way I look at it. But I don't know until you actually get into it. And whatever you ever get to, there's never going to be a set number because of how our schedule is, and we can't play everybody. And when you have 2, the 3rd team complains. When you have 4, the 15th complains. When you have 8, the 19th complains. So, the NCAA basketball is up to like 68, and you still have last one in, last one out starting in January, and people are complaining because there's the 69th team in the country that they didn't get into the tournament. So, and the fact that it is 2 years out, and our whole deal is worry about today. So, it'll be interesting. I don't know, and until I actually see it in action, and I know a big question all the coaches have is how are the 4 teams going to be determined? And from what I understand, that's still up in the air. So, I think it's a step in the right direction, but I don't know, at least in our lifetimes, if we're ever going to get to the way it should be. So.
Coach, you mentioned 22 practices before you want to set the depth chart. With the quarterback specifically, is that the same with when you want to decide on your starter? And do you have a deadline date that you want to announce a starter by, a quarterback?
Yeah, we'll announce what our lineup for the Arkansas State's going to be after 22 practices, so for all 22 positions. So they're all in the same thing. It's not like we'll have one position that's going to be on a different schedule. We treat everything the same way, Jake.
Chip, you've been here a lot of years now. How would you compare the talent of this team to talent of years past throughout the whole squad? And in terms of talent and depth, how would you compare it?
I think it's relative. I always look at it year in and year out. We may have been more talented offensively my first year here in 2007 when you look back at it in hindsight. You had Jonathan Stewart, Jeremiah Johnson, Dennis Dixon. You had 4 offensive linemen that all went on to play in the NFL with Max Unger and Fanucchi and Jeff Schwartz and guys like that. Ed Dixon was a tight end who's still playing in the NFL. So I really never got into comparing teams from now and to teams we had in the past because it doesn't really benefit me. I don't get anything out of comparing them. So, I think we have talent here and I'm excited about it, but we're still a young football team. We have 16 seniors on this team. When the predominant amount of our guys, I think there's 65 of them are freshmen, redshirt freshmen or sophomores. So, but there's some talent there, but talent honestly really doesn't mean much. It's production, and that's what we're looking for. So.
Coach in the back, you've obviously had no trouble implementing quarterbacks into this system as you move through the years. Is that one of the things you enjoy about coaching, is that challenge, or all things being equal, Darren comes back for his senior season and it's a little bit easier anyway?
I think what we all enjoy in coaching is just actually being out in the field and instructing and that part of it, whether it's a new face or an old face. I think it just depends on what that face is. And one thing that was great about Darren is he was awesome to coach because he just soaked things in and he always wanted more. I think sometimes when you get some older players, they think they've got all the answers. We don't have that. And that's what's encouraging. So, guys like Michael Clay, even though Michael's been here and going into playing for in his 4th year here, is still always trying to learn, still always trying to get better as a football player, and that's what our entire team is like. So that's an exciting part of it. So I don't think it matters whether there's returners or not returners. It just really matters what their attitudes are.
Coach, losing Darren Thomas right over here.
Gotcha.
Losing your Rose Bowl winning quarterback. Talk about where your 2 quarterbacks are right now as you go into camp, and how promising is it to have a couple of talented guys ready to take that role?
I think both of them are right over there, so I know where they are going into camp, which is good. But it happens at every position, and it's unique because I think quarterback's unique to this sport. But I would still argue with people that the loss of David Paulson may be the biggest loss of this football team because of the value that he had for this team. And there are unproven guys at the tight end spot that haven't really played in games, and it's similar to where we are, at our quarterback spot. But I've got a lot of faith after seeing Brian for a couple years now and Marcus for a full year now, in both those guys' abilities to play. But until they actually get in a game, it's always an interesting dynamic. Sam Rutigliano, longtime NFL coach of the Cleveland Browns, used to say that you don't know what you have in a quarterback, and it's like a tea bag. You don't know what you have until you put it in hot water. And as much as we can try to simulate that in practice, till that first time they get out in the field and take a snap in Autzen Stadium with it packed, and I know they did in the spring game, but the spring game really is more closer to our 15th spring practice than it is to actually the opening game against Arkansas State. So, their first snap is going to be really our first look at how they handle it. And I anticipate them being very successful, but, we'll see. And that's obviously a big question for all of us.
Coach, obviously in the offseason, NCAA says you can't have unlimited access and talking with your players and meeting with and everything. What kind of reports do you get, or did you get from the offseason between spring and now, and what did you hear?
I didn't get any. The only people I talked to with Tim Brugman, our academic guys, just how those guys are doing over at the Jacobs Center. So Coach Radcliffe was away at the Olympics, so actually Rad just came in late last night. So, and it really doesn't mean anything to me. You can tell me what everybody did, but I'm going to see him this afternoon. So, to be honest with you, it doesn't matter how great a kid's summer has. If he goes out and can't make it through practice today, what he did in June and July probably wasn't enough. So, and I'm always valuing my own opinion on what's going on out there. Not, Joe Jones said this kid had a great summer. That's great. I don't think he did. I just saw him throw up. So, we'll see.
Coach, are you opposed to playing both quarterbacks even without injuries this fall? And also, what's been your level of contact with Darren Thomas and your thoughts on what's happened to him since he decided to leave Eugene and his possibilities of maybe coming back to the program at some point as a GA, or if he has an interest in coaching in the future?
Is that a 5-part question? Or?
Yeah. Getting them all in as I can.
Let's start. First was
the quarterbacks
opposed to playing two quarterbacks? Yeah. No, I'm not opposed to playing two quarterbacks. Everywhere I've been, it's always shaken itself out that one kid has emerged, so that there has been, a starting quarterback, that has emerged, and it was evident to not just only myself when I had the opportunity to make the decision, but everybody else involved in that decision. So I haven't been in it, but I'll never write it down. It's kind of like in Pirates of the Caribbean. There are rules for pirates and there are guidelines for pirates. So these are guidelines that I kind of judge myself by, but I'm not going to lock myself into a box and say that there's absolutely no way we're going to play two quarterbacks. If it ends up being dead smack even, I've never been in that situation, so I don't know, but I don't think it's fair to either one of those guys if it is that way. So we'll see, in terms of that. Darren, we haven't spoken to him a ton over the summertime, but spoken to his high school coach, Bob Jones. I know he's working out with Bob. He's been to a couple NFL camps and tryout situations, and I think he's just waiting to see if something happens with some quarterbacks here in the preseason camp to see if he'll get an invitation to a camp. And would I entertain Darren being a graduate assistant or a coach at some point in time? I think he'd be an outstanding coach and graduate assistant if that's the path he wants to go, because I know he's got a passion for the game. And I love coaching him. I love being around him. So, is that all 5?
You got him.
Thanks.
Chip, wanted to ask you about facilities around the Pac-12. Cal and Washington are both massive renovations of their stadiums. UCLA's updating the Rose Bowl. Around the conference, you look that it's building. You guys are building the building out here. Your take on that, how important it is to you as a coach to recruit and all that stuff, and just what you think of the landscape of the Pac-12 and how all that stuff is going.
First and foremost, I have no idea what's going on in any other school. So the only thing I would know is hopefully they can get better visitor locker rooms. So, because some of the places they put us when we go on the road you guys would be surprised. But besides that, I can't speak to what's going on at other places. I know for us, we are kind of fractured right now. There's different people some people meet in the Mo's, some people meet in their offices, some people meet in the classrooms. I think with the expansion of sports that's gone on here at times, I think the whole Casanova building is kind of bursting at the edges, and the ability to, kind of gather some more space, move us out. People will take over that thing. I think the need for a dining facility for the entire athletic department was a crucial part of it, that's not a meeting room / reception area / everything. I think we've done a lot of things those ways, so I think we're excited about, where our facilities are headed.
Your defense is getting a lot of recognition coming into this season.
They should. And they should have since 2009 and 2010 and 2011.
No argument.
Then why didn't you write it?
I think I have. Nobody reads my
Relax,
stuff.
Okay?
As different as it looks since you took over, is this sort of a culmination of where you wanted to be in terms of depth and scheme and all those things? or are people just catching on?
I would say the latter, but I think you guys are smarter than that. But you don't win championships unless you play great defense, and I believe, I really truly believe our defense has been underrated. But I think, you know, and we've gotten better. I think they have a better understanding of our schemes. I think our coaches have a better understanding of our players, and I'm glad they're getting the recognition. But I think what Nick and our guys on the defensive side of the ball have done for the last 3 years is, you know, you don't go, and I don't know, I think 25-2 in this conference and not have a good defense. You know, and I think it's the same thing with our special teams. I think, you know, our special teams don't get enough credit. And obviously, we do score a lot of points on offense. But, you know, it's to win and to play at the level we've been at and to be 34-6 in 3 years, I think you have to be sound both offensively, defensively, and special teams. And that's always been our goal. You know, we've never wanted to be known for one thing or another. We want to be known as a great program. And it doesn't matter if we score 15 points in a game, like we had to do down at Cal, but our defense played unbelievable in that game, and we had a huge punt return for a touchdown. You know, and we savor that victory as much as any other victory we've had when we're going and putting 60 on somebody. So I think our defense is finally getting the notoriety that they deserve. And for us to continue to play at the level that we think we can play at, those guys need to continue to improve and keep chasing that vision that we have for them on defense.
We have about 4 more minutes here, so anybody saving that one question that they hope to get later, I wouldn't save it.
Hey, Coach, back to Brian and Marcus for a second. Can you just talk a little bit about what you want to see from each of them on the field over the next month as they kind of take the next step in their football careers? And then I wanted to ask you about the running with the Bulls. Did you gain any coaching insights or techniques or anything like that from that experience?
That's a bizarre 2-part question, but
there's not one. I can't give you a concrete thing that, hey, I need to see this. You know, it's always been which guy moves the offense better. You know, sometimes it's which guy moves the twos better. You know, and it's interesting where do they make the players around them better? You know, and can you have confidence in them that when they go in the game that they're going to execute the game plan itself? You know, and that's. It's one of those where it's not as hard and fast. There's numbers we're looking at. It's statistical analysis in terms of how this thing is going to be broken down. But I've been fortunate, and I don't know why it's worked out that way, but every time it's worked out, everybody could kind of tell after observing 20 some odd. And when you go back to, we had 15 practices in the spring, and now we'll go 22 practices here in the fall. So 37 opportunities to really get a full evaluation of them. And in terms of coaching analysis and insight, it was an ironic, we went into it like coaches. We got there on Friday, we walked the course, we plotted it all out exactly where we would be on each turn. You know, why not to go on the left side because it's a left side turn and those guys the Bulls are going to do all that. Want to stay out of the middle, you know, make sure we knew exactly how we were doing to see if we could get into the stadium. And then when they fire off 2 rockets, one rocket goes off to signify the Bulls have started running, the second rocket goes off. And they told us it's about 15 seconds. It seemed like it was 3 seconds, and that means all the Bulls are on the course. And then after that, it was just total anarchy. And every plan we had that we were going to execute was out the window, and we were just running for our lives. So much as what same thing that happens when the ball's kicked off there. You better have a contingency plan, because if your plan doesn't exactly work, you're going to get hit with a horn. So we studied film. We studied YouTube tape. We did it all, and none of it helped. Afterwards? No, we left and went to the beach.
Over here.
Coach Kelly, can you talk about leadership roles specifically on the line of scrimmage on offensive and defensive, the importance of returning students coming back and helping out some of the newer guys and knowing the teams they've already played?
Yeah, and I think that's what's great about this group is that we do have a real good core group of leaders, and we talk about horizontal leadership all the time where you know, vertical leadership goes from us down to our players, and then it's got to be dispersed through that. And, you know, up front, there's guys like Carson York and Ronas Grasu and Ryan Clanton, Nick Cody that have played a ton of football for us on the offensive side of the ball. And then defensively, Taylor Hart, Ricky Hamuli, Isaac Remington, Deion Jordan, Wade Killakeepy. You know, there's a core group of guys on the defensive line that have been around, understand how we practice, understand our scheme, understand our system. And really that's, you know, we'll start to see it as we get out on the field, you know, in these next couple of days, because those are the guys that had our players here, you know, since April 28th. And we'll see what type of job they did. But I'm real confident in those guys because I know what type of individuals they are.
Coach, I'll give you a bizarre two-part question. First of all, what's next on your bucket list after that?
I don't have a bucket list. That was just something I want to do. So I know when people say that, like, is there a list of other things that, you know, I just have always wanted to do it and it fit my schedule. And I literally was there for 36 hours. I flew over, did it, and came back. So it wasn't like it was a vacation. It wasn't, and I don't have a list that I'm checking things off left and right. And except for this was second on my bucket list.
National championship?
No, this media day.
Okay.
So I got that checked off, and the
good.
list is at 2. So
You're good to go.
I'm good to go.
And a football question. DeAnthony Thomas, after watching him last year, it's hard to imagine him being more dynamic, but how much better can he be? And talk about how you're going to utilize him this year.
I obviously think he can be better. You know, for him to do what he did and his numbers kind of jump out at you when it's all over and done with. You know, I think sometimes the vision or the eyes that we see our guys through, because we see them every day, you don't really think about it. And I actually had a conversation with George in June about it. And when he rattled off, you know, 2,300 all-purpose yards, 18, you know, you're like, wow. You know, if I had heard that about somebody else, you're like, that's a pretty good year. But when you're with them every day, and we see him in practice, and I've said it before, and I think I said it at media day, I've seen him do things in practice that you're just going to shake your head at, you know, and that's why I believe he can be better. I think it's our job as coaches to put him in a situation where, you know, he can utilize that. But we were real conscious last year to not put a whole heck of a lot on his plate because he was still a true freshman and was really playing 2 positions. So, but I think, you know, watching what he did in the spring for us, I think you'll see him a little bit more in the return game. He's a dynamic of football players I've ever been around, and I hope we get to use him more, and that everybody looks at the numbers, you know, at the end of this year coming up and says, wow, he kind of blew his freshman year out of the water. If that's the case, and I think we had a pretty good season. So.
So back to DeAnthony, Chip. Does he, first of all, for you guys, does he need to be better this year? That's the first question. The second question is there a balance that you have to try to maintain as he maybe gets more carries at running back, and yet you still like him in the hybrid role? I mean, is that something that you have to evaluate as the thing goes along?
We do, and we were fortunate last year that he was really the 3rd running back. And so we could use him a little bit more in the slot, knowing that if LaMichael needed a breather, Kenyon was going in, or if Kenyon needed a breather, LaMichael was available to go again. So, you know, I think some of that also, not as contingent upon him, George, would be what's our other depth and how does that emerge at the running back position, you know, in terms of using them in a multiple role fashion. But from a knowledge standpoint, I know he can handle it. And we've taken those guys and put them in different meetings. So instead of him going to the wideouts and going to the running backs, you know, they meet with me now. So I have a couple of guys that I meet with. I think that's made things a little bit easier for them. You know, they're not bouncing around room to room and hearing it from 2 different voices. You know, so I think his role can expand from a knowledge standpoint, but we're still going to be, we're always conscious of, you know, basically how many touches are they getting and what do we do with them. But most of that, in determining the touches, I think really depends on the depth behind them. And that's what, you know, if you look at LaMichael, I mean, we ideally never really wanted to give LaMichael more than 20 carries, but there are games that he carried it 30 times in, but the reason he carried it in 30 times is there was no one else. You know, it wasn't because we felt like we wanted to get him 30 touches in a game. So, and again, it's kind of like running with the Bulls. Your best laid plans are going to be out the window after the opening kick if someone gets trampled. So if someone gets trampled, we may have to, I mean, there may be a game where he's got to carry it 30 times if Kenyon's not available, but we'll see how that goes.
And then my other question was, does he need to be better? You want him to be better, you expect him to be better, but in terms of this team's success, I mean, does he need to make that next step?
Good question. And again, I think it depends on the depth everywhere else. You know, are we going to be a one-trick pony where it's, you know, him and maybe just Kenyon? You know, what emerges at the tight end spot? You know, what emerges at the wide receiver spot? You know, and I think the 2 big losses for us from last year's team that aren't always talked about are the loss of David Paulson at tight end and the loss of LT Tune at receiver. You know, end up being the MVP of the Rose Bowl. And it's, I think, figuring out how much we're putting on Kenyon and DeAnthony's plate really depends on what goes on at the tight end spot and what goes on at the wide receiver spot in terms of playmakers emerging at those positions. So.
Yeah, talk a bit about Coach Pelham and what he's meant to the staff.
DP. It's awesome. One of the rocks of this program. You know, along with Wood, played here. speaks volumes, you know, in terms of the continuity of this staff. Been here for 20+ years. His players are always prepared. His players are always, you know, first to meetings. His players are always, you know, there's just a stability with when you got DP out there. Does an unbelievable job for us as our recruiting coordinator. You know, has really handled the Los Angeles area for us in recruiting, and have gotten, since DP's been here, you know, some of the greatest players in Oregon history are, you know, a direct result of his recruiting efforts. So he's awesome, you know, he's a great mentor. He's a great role model to the players on our team, and really one of the rocks of this program.
Last question.
Coach, looking back to last season and the USC game and that loss, what specifically did you learn about your team, whether it be schematically or intangible-wise, from that game that you're working on to change to make your team better this year?
Honestly, I mean, we don't look at a specific game from last year and say, from this game, this is what we have to do specifically when we get to preseason camp. But, you know, there's just the real things you take away from a game like that. We had a blocked punt, and we turned the ball over twice in the red zone when we were in positive first down situations, and you can't do that against a good football team and expect to win. So, you know, the game came down to a field goal at the last kick of the clock. We had the ball in the middle of the field, and we just missed it. But, you know, you take away those two critical fumbles we had in the red zone that were a result of us being bad ball security players, and you take away the block punt, it may have been a different game. But, you know, we will always work. We worked on that immediately, and we always work on that. We always work on ball security. We always work on punt protection. But we don't specifically look at that game and then target, you know, in practice number 2, we're going to go back to what went on in the USC game. But when you turn the football over in the red zone against a good football team, or you have a punt blocked, I think Coach Osborne in our meeting today when talking to our punt team is, you know, since he's been here in the last 6 years, there's been 2 punt blocks since he's been here in the last 6 years, and we lost both games. So obviously that's a huge thing for us to work on in terms of our protection. It was just a mistake, but, you know, sometimes when you play a really good football team, those mistakes hurt you. So.
Thank you. Players are
Thank you.